Atton's wobbly wheel. It was a splendid day on the island of Sodor. The birds were tweeting and the cows were mooing, and Atton was having a wonderful day. He was travelling down the track at a tremendous speed that he heard a big loud cracking noise. His driver and fireman stopped him to see what it was. "What was that?" asked Atton. The driver and fireman had bad news. "You have cracked a wheel," informed the fireman. "Now we'll have to get it fixed before we get to the big station," Atton scoffed. "I don't think so. I have to get there. My passengers will not be happy." "Oh no," smiled the fireman. "You're not going anywhere, and you have to stay there." Atton did not care. He constantly forced his driver and fireman to get moving, and Atton puffed on. Whenever he rattled and wobbled, his driver and fireman had angrily told him to stop, but he wouldn't. As he arrived at Lower Tidmouth Station, Bertram was waiting impatiently. "Where have you been?" he asked. "Oh, sorry," said Atton. "I had a wobbly wheel. No need to worry though." There he had been spotted by Bertie and Arthur, who were laughing. "Oh dear," said Arthur. "You don't look so good." "I know," said Atton, "but it's no laughing matter." "Maybe," said Bertie. "You're lucky you don't have tyres," he said. Except you burst a wheel, you burst a safety valve someday." Atton groaned. "If you'll excuse me, I'd best be off." And he left his coach, and he came to a complete stop, realizing that he was wobbling. "My golly," chuckled Duke. "Atton really is wobbling," he said. Soon Atton was not amused, with all the other engines laughing at him. "Just you wait," he said. "If you guys think this is funny, you're dead wrong," he said, and he puffed crossly away. That night, instead of sleeping in the sheds with his fellow engines, Atton decided to sleep at a siding outside Lower Tidmouth Station. Atton couldn't sleep very well. He was still worrying over the other engines making fun of his wobbly wheel at the back, and he couldn't get any sleep. By morning, he was rudely awoken by the sound of passengers crowding at Lower Tidmouth Station. Molly and Edward were there taking on passengers. The Fat Controller arrived, and he looked like he had heard what Atton was having at the moment. "So, at first I thought it was a rumour, but I guess not," he said. But ever since I've heard about your wobbly wheel, Atton," he continued, "I'm sorry to say this, but the works at the moment is so busy with engines getting repaired. You might have to wait a little while longer until you're finished shunting with Ryan and Stafford at the yards." "But sir," Atton said crossly, you can't deny me to go to the works and work with other engines." "Really useful engines don't argue, Atton. You better do as you're told," he said, and he walked off. Atton blushed with embarrassment. Molly thought it was funny. How nice of you to work with both Ryan and Stafford at the shunting yards. I bet they can't even cope with you and your wobbly wheels," she said. You and your gold paint and your red stripes and your wobbly back wheels," she said. Now you'll be playing with Ryan and Stafford at the shunting yards until you collapse." Then Edward stepped in. "Oh," said Edward, "will she now? But but I heard stories of an engine who got stuck on a hill for pulling too many coaches. Molly felt very cross, and she puffed out of the station with a huge cloud of steam. Atton felt embarrassed. "Don't worry about her," said Edward. "I'm sure the Fat Controller will get your wheels sorted," he said. "I promise. You have to believe in yourself." "Thanks, Edward," said Atton sadly. "I appreciate your compromise, but I'd rather go to the works than play with Ryan and Stafford at the shunting yards." It will not take long," said Edward. "Trust me, I've had worse things of going to the works, but still, I'm all right," he said, and Edward puffed away cheerfully. Atton hoped that Edward was helping. After that, Ryan and Stafford were still busily playing with trucks and bumping them in the front of their buffers, while poor Atton had to do the shunting on his own, and his wobbly wheel was not helping at all. Later, Atton was at a siding, still sulking, when Mooshy puffed up with some empty boxcars. Mooshy could see Atton looked upset. "You know," said Atton to Mooshy, I really feel like I should just go to the works instead of just me doing all the jobs I don't feel like doing most likely." Mooshy smiled. "Well," he said, "you might probably just want to stick around for a few seconds until the extra engines are out of the works. Plus, I've seen Emily get out of the workshop a few days ago, and she's had her wheels polished, and Edward was the last engine this morning to get out of the works." Atton was happy, and now was his chance. Do you think you can push me down a hill so I can go as fast as I can to the works without crashing?" "I suppose I could do that," said Mooshy happily. Next, Mooshy's driver and fireman uncoupled Mooshy from the box fans. Slowly and gently but surely, the snorting engines forced the empty box wagons up the hill. They went out of a tunnel, and then, as they approached the top of the mountains, Atton was beginning to feel excited, even though he was starting to wobble and judder. "How much further?" he asked. "Not long now," went Mooshy. He was pushing so hard, even though he couldn't feel the heavy weight of Atton. At last they've reached the bridge. "All right," said Atton. Then he looked upon the empty valley that leads to the works. "Now!" he shouted. Mooshy then backed up, blew his whistle as loud as he could, and pushed Atton down the mountain. Whee! Went Atton, but then there was trouble. He went diverse into a siding and crashed into some buffers. Atton looked embarrassed and had nothing to say. "Oh dear," thought Atton. Then he saw a small-looking piece of circle rolling to the front of him. Atton gulped. He knew what it was, and he could do nothing. Later, Edward had just brought Rocky, and the red breakdown crane lifted Atton onto a flatbed truck. Atton blushed with embarrassment. Rocky laughed as if he had heard the whole story. The fat controller, who was feeling not amused, had had stern words with Atton and walked off back into Edward's cab. At last, Atton was taken to the works on Rocky's flatbed truck by Edward. "Don't worry," smiled Edward. Your back wheel will be fixed soon, and then you'll be as dangerous as ever. Eh, Atton? Atton couldn't help but smile. He knew Edward was only joking.